Sergio Perez's seat has been one of the most controversial things that have been discussed in the past couple of days, and after allegedly agreeing within the internal circles of the team that he should be replaced, and then come out with a completely different statement, a very interesting report has resurfaced as to how Red Bull was pressured towards this move. If this happens to be true, not only the integrity of the team would be destroyed, but also of the entire sport, as it's clear evidence that Liberty Media and F1 are putting money and popularity over racing, destroying young talent on the way. It's safe to say that many were surprised as to how Perez got to keep his seat in Red Bull despite the poor performance that he has had in the first half of the season, or more precisely, the last 8 races ever since Miami. This is a stretch in which Perez has scored only 28 points, and compared to his teammate, that is almost 5 times less, as Verstappen scored 146, and most of the times the team didn't even have the fastest car in the grid. It was purely the Verstappen factor that extracted the performance out of it. This is one of the primary reasons why Red Bull have thought about replacing Perez, and when you think about the fact that the drivers like Gasly and Albon were replaced for far less in a far worse car, it was expected that Verstappen would receive a new teammate. Even the post-Spa vibes that were received from Ricciardo and Verstappen drinking champagne and taking the common helicopter to their homes went on to say that it was a done deal, as a report also stated that Marko and Horner have both informed Max that from tomorrow he will have a new teammate. It would have been easily understandable if you just looked at the table from 2024 and compared where Perez and Verstappen stood next to each other in the first 14 races of the season. Verstappen is dominating Perez in every single category, having a 14-0 lead in qualifying, almost 8 times better qualifying positions on average, and a 146-point lead in the Drivers' Championship. But what is most worrying is that during one-lap pace, Verstappen is usually 6/10ths faster than Perez, while in the race, mostly because Verstappen was on cruise mode in the first 5 races, the difference is around 5/10ths per second in favor of the 3-time world champion. There are easily a number of drivers out there who would be more than happy to prove to Red Bull that they're wrong, but unfortunately for them it is not about driving skills and capabilities right now, but about money and marketing. But when the meeting actually happened, Horner decided to keep Perez as the second option next to Max, saying, "Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver, despite all of the speculations of late. We look forward to seeing him perform at circuits where he has also previously done well after the summer break." Furthermore, Horner also went on to state that the team would work more towards making a car that would suit Perez's style, which is something that is also compromising Verstappen's driving style, even though the car definitely needs upgrades and everything they've brought to the car is now not working as they hoped. All of this situation is putting a lot of question marks as to why Red Bull would deliberately continue with a driver who's putting the Constructors' Championship in huge jeopardy, as the difference between them and McLaren is now just 42 points, and Mercedes is starting to catch up from behind as well. And it seems like the primary reason as to why this has been done is because of the pressure that Liberty Media, the company that has ownership rights of the sport, has told Red Bull that under no circumstance they should get rid of Perez. Of course, this cannot be either confirmed or denied by the team because it would put them in even bigger trouble than they are in right now. However, the cards are looking like they've been shuffled in exactly this way. You cannot have Marko saying that there will be a lot of talks about Perez's future and that he totally collapsed in Spa, to Red Bull continuing the collaboration with Perez when they had the perfect alibi to get rid of him. He finished 8th after starting 2nd in the grid. But what we must not forget is the other side of Perez and Red Bull, and that is the sponsorship money, as well as the popularity and merchandise sales that the Mexican currently holds in his home country. It was announced earlier this year by Helmut Marko that one thing that Perez is much better than Verstappen in is merchandise sales in Mexico, as well as other parts of North America, and if they were to drop him, the viewership of the Mexican GP would drop massively. An even wilder scenario is that Liberty Media have offered to mitigate the losses that Perez would do with his performance to the team, considering he doesn't recover his form in the next 10 races, just so that he would be able to race alongside the team when the Mexican GP comes on schedule. It is quite paradoxical and bizarre that a single race has decided the future of a man who's won 5 races with Red Bull but is nowhere near where he's supposed to be. But nevertheless, we are living in the simulation where Perez and Red Bull have created for themselves, and apart from Liberty Media, another strong figure has stood behind Perez when it comes to his time in Red Bull being continued: Carlos Slim. This is easily one of the richest men in Mexico, owning a lot of businesses including Telcel and Telmex, one of the primary sponsors of Red Bull. When you have his promise that his financial losses would remain more or less irrelevant, then it's easy to understand why Red Bull won't care about the Constructors' Championship after all. They would receive more time in the wind tunnel if they were to lose the first place that they had finished in the past 2 years. But just for instance, one place between the top 3 teams is worth somewhere around $12 to $15 million, which is why you need to understand how important it is for Perez's financial support that he remains a Red Bull driver throughout the 2024 season. But if you are to ask Helmut Marko, things are far from over, as the cards will be reshuffled again in 2025. This is the man who has promised a seat to Lawson for 2025 onwards, and now that Red Bull have kept the exact same lineup in their team as well as in Racing Bulls, it's safe to assume that Lawson would look for a future elsewhere, with Audi likely being the biggest team on the horizon that would be interested in his services. Be that as it may, the Kiwi driver is now put under a lot of pressure because he knows what he's capable of. He's shown during a 5-race stint in the worst car on the grid that he can be the next big thing for Red Bull. But now that money and marketing rules in the sport, there's no beating Perez in this category, regardless of how many times he crashes the car or how many times he drops out of Q1. And while Ricciardo could be angry because of what he was promised during Spa and what he ended up with, it's safe to say that even his position in the team is not really based on pure performance and great driving. Yes, he does have a lot of technical knowledge that kind of turned the season around for the Racing Bulls, who are now under a threat to lose the position from Haas as the emerging American team brought a lot of points in the past couple of races, but other than that, he has 10 points less than his teammate and is under a lot of scrutiny for his performances recently. To top that off, Helmut Marko stated that the wish of the Racing Bull shareholders is that the team would consist of 2 young drivers and not what they have right now, which was yet another clear indicator that Ricciardo would be replaced by Lawson as early as during the summer break. So all of this is now showing that Red Bull clearly doesn't care about race performance anymore as long as Max is in a league of his own and continues with winning the championships in the drivers category. But this is definitely not a guarantee for 2025, because even Horner himself said that there's no beating about the bush. In the next 18 months, the performance of the teams will be more or less equal, and even though the team is trying its best to bring a lot of performance to the car, it's inevitable that they have to accept that a certain limit has been reached, and whether we like it or not, this is the maximum we could see out of the RB20. This is also putting Verstappen under a lot of pressure because not only was he failed by his own team in terms of being promised something that they didn't deliver, but he's now no longer able to dominate the grid in the same fashion he did back in 2022 and 2023. With all this in mind, what do you think about the backing of Carlos Slim and Liberty Media when it comes to Perez's seat? Let us know in the comments below.